The RPM gauge dropped to 0 instantly, and the silence in the engine room hit us harder than any alarm. We were sailing on the MV Atlantic Conveyor, a container ship heading for Newark. We were about 200 miles off the coast of Nova Scotia. It was late November. The North Atlantic is never kind at this time of year. The wind was blowing a consistent force 8 from the northeast, and the swells were running high, maybe 5 or 6 meters. The ship was fully loaded with containers stacked 4 high on the deck. We were a heavy ship deep in the water, which usually made the ride smoother, but the sea was rough enough to make walking difficult. I was the chief engineer on board. It was 6 timed hours. Just time for the watch change. I was in the ship's office on the upper deck finishing some paperwork on the fuel consumption report. The ship had a steady rhythm. The big man B&W main engine turned at 90 revolutions per minute. It created a constant deep vibration that vibrated through the steel floors and the bulkheads. You stop hearing it after a few weeks, but your body feels it. As long as that vibration is there, everything is normal. The crew was experienced. Captain Miller was on the bridge. He had been at sea for 40 years. The second engineer, a man named Davis, was down in the engine control room taking over the watch. The third engineer was getting ready to go up to the mess room for dinner. Outside, the daylight was fading fast. The spray from the bow was flying over the containers and hitting the bridge windows. It was a loud, noisy day, but it was a standard operation for us. We had plenty of fuel. The machinery was well maintained, and we were on schedule. If you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing. It helps this channel reach more sailors. Thank you. I put my pen down and looked out the porthole. The horizon was jagged with gray waves. I decided to go to the bridge to check the weather report for the night. I wanted to know if we needed to secure anything extra in the engine room workshops. I walked up the internal stairs. The ship pitched forward, then slammed down. I held the handrail tight. On the bridge, the mood was quiet. The helmsman was focused on the rudder angle indicator. He was using a lot of rudder to keep us on course against the wind. Captain Miller was looking at the radar. "Afternoon, Chief," Miller said. "It's going to be a bumpy night." "Everything's secure down below?" I said. "Yeah, temperatures are good." "We need to maintain speed," Miller said. "Even if we slow down, we lose steerage in this swell." That was when it happened. The floor beneath my feet stopped vibrating. It wasn't a gradual slowdown. It was instant. The deep thrumming sound of the engine cut out completely. The only sound left was the wind howling outside and the crashing of the water against the hull. The telegraph on the bridge console lit up with a red light. The RPM indicator fell straight to the bottom, the main engine. Stopped! Alarm started buzzing, a sharp piercing sound that filled the bridge. "Engine failure," Miller said. His voice was flat. He didn't shout. He looked at the tachometer, then at me. "Chief, get it back." I didn't say a word. I turned and ran for the stairwell. I didn't wait for the elevator. I slid down the handrails, skipping steps, jumping down the landings. I went down 5 decks in about 30 seconds. As I reached the upper engine deck, the lights flickered. The main shaft generator had stopped producing power because the engine had stopped. The emergency generator kicked in with a loud bang somewhere far above, and the auxiliary diesel generators started their automatic start sequence. For a few seconds, the alleyway was dim, lit only by emergency battery lights. Then the auxiliaries connected, and the bright fluorescent lights snapped back on. I burst into the engine control room. Davis was standing at the main console. The panel was covered in flashing red lights. The alarm siren was screaming in the small room. Davis pressed the acknowledge button and the siren stopped, leaving only the silence of the dead engine. "Status?" I asked. "Tripped on low fuel oil pressure," Davis said. He pointed to the pressure gauge. It was at 0. It just dropped. No warning, no fluctuation, just 0. "Did the standby pump start?" "It tried," Davis said. "It didn't build pressure. The motor is running, but there is no flow." This was bad. If the pumps were running, but not moving fluid, we had a supply issue. "Let's go," I said. We put on our ear defenders and grabbed our flashlights. We ran out of the control room and down the steep steel ladders to the bottom plates. The heat was intense down there. The smell of hot oil and diesel was heavy. The ship rolled heavily to starboard. I had to grab a pipe to stop myself from falling into the bilge. Because the engine had stopped, the propeller was not pushing water over the rudder. The ship had lost its steering. We were at the mercy of the waves now. We reached the fuel booster module. The 2 heavy electric pumps were there. One was hot, the one that had been running. The other was running now, its motor spinning, but the pressure gauge on the discharge line showed nothing. "Check the suction filter," I said. Davis grabbed a large wrench from the shadow board. The duplex filter allows you to switch to a clean filter without stopping the flow. He pulled the lever to switch the chamber. It was heavy. "It's stiff," he yelled over the noise of the auxiliary generators. "Pull it." He put his weight into it. The valve turned. He opened the vent cock on the top of the filter to bleed the air. A small hiss of air came out, but no oil. "No oil in the filter," Davis said. "It's not clogged, it's empty." The supply wasn't reaching the pumps. The problem was further back in the line. The ship rolled again, deeper this time. I felt the deck tilt steeply. We were turning broadside to the waves. The heavy tools on the workbench behind us crashed to the floor. A drum of chemical cleaner tipped over and rolled across the grating. The phone on the bulkhead rang. I picked it up. It was the captain. "Chief, we are drifting beam 2, Miller said. "We are rolling 30 degrees. The cargo lashings are under heavy load. I need that engine." "We have no fuel pressure," I said. "The pumps are dry." "Fix it," Miller said. "You have 10 minutes before we drift into the traffic lane. There's a tanker coming down south." I hung up. I looked at Davis. "Check the mixing tank," I said. The quick closing valve. Maybe it tripped. We scrambled up the ladder to the middle platform. The mixing tank held the fuel ready for the engine. We checked the valve level. It was open. The tank level glass showed it was full. There was fuel in the tank, but it wasn't getting to the pumps. I touched the pipe coming out of the tank. It was hot. I followed the pipe down toward the booster pumps. About halfway down, I touched the pipe again. It was cold. Heavy fuel oil is thick like tar. It has to be heated to 130 degrees Celsius to flow. If it gets cold, it turns into a solid block. "Steam tracing failed," I said. "The line is plugged." Davis touched the pipe. "It's stone cold, Chief. The steam trap must have stuck closed. The line is solid." We were in big trouble. We had a blocked fuel line in the middle of a storm, drifting sideways with traffic nearby. The main engine couldn't start without fuel. We couldn't clear the blockage without heat, and we didn't have time to heat it naturally. The ship took another violent roll, throwing us against the railing. The emergency lights flickered again. We were dead in the water. The pipe was a 6-inch steel line. It was wrapped in insulation, but underneath the metal was cold. We knew exactly where the problem was. It was the common suction line that fed both booster pumps. Even if we switched the valves to run on marine diesel oil, the diesel couldn't get through. The plug of solid heavy fuel was blocking the junction. "Get the steam lamps," I told Davis. We tried to apply external heat. Davis connected a steam hose to a utility station and sprayed hot steam directly onto the pipe surface. I grabbed a heavy hammer and struck the pipe repeatedly. The vibration sometimes helps break the solid wax inside. We worked for 5 minutes. The steam filled the space with a white fog, making it hard to see. The ship rolled violently to port, and we both had to grab the railing. I checked the thermometer on the pipe again. It hadn't moved. The steel was too thick, and the plug was too long. It would take hours to melt it this way. The bridge phone rang. I picked it up. "Chief," Captain Miller said, "the tanker is 1 mile off our starboard bow. They are trying to alter course, but they are heavy. We are drifting right into their path. I need power now." "We can't clear the line," I said. "It's solid." "Then find another way," he said, "or we hit them." I looked at the pipe, then at the pumps. We couldn't fix the blockage in time. We had to bypass it entirely. "Davis," I said, "we are going to bypass the suction line. We will run a flexible hose from the diesel oil service tank drain directly to the standby pump." It was a risky plan. The diesel oil MDO tank was on the upper platform, 10 meters above us. We had to run a rubber hose down the ladder, disconnect the main steel pipe from the pump, and bolt the hose directly to the pump inlet. If the hose kinked or burst, we would spray fuel everywhere. If the connection leaked, the pump would suck air and fail. "Get the spare sludge transfer hose," I ordered, the 2-inch one, and the flange adapter kit. Davis ran to the storeroom. I stayed at the pump. I took 2 adjustable wrenches and started loosening the bolts on the suction flange of the standby pump. There were 8 bolts. They were rusted and tight. The ship pitched down heavily. My wrench slipped. I slammed my knuckles against the steel motor casing. I didn't look at my hand. I reset the wrench and pulled again. The first bolt cracked loose, then the second. Davis came back dragging a heavy black rubber hose. He had a box of flange adapters under his arm. "Go up to the MDO tank," I said. "Connect the top end to the drain valve. Don't open it until I yell." Davis climbed the ladder. The ship was rolling 30 degrees now. I could hear crates of spare parts sliding across the workshop floor nearby. The noise of the storm outside the hull was a dull roar, but in here, the auxiliary engines were deafening. I removed the last bolt from the pump suction. I used a pry bar to separate the heavy steel pipe from the pump housing. A clot of cold black sludge fell out onto the deck plates. The pipe was completely blocked. I pushed the steel pipe aside just enough to clear the opening. I grabbed the end of the rubber hose Davis had dropped down. I fitted the flange adapter. It was heavy. I had to hold the hose up with one hand and thread the bolts with the other. The ship rolled to starboard. The weight of the hose pulled me backward. I lost my footing on the oily deck plates. I fell hard on my side, sliding toward the bilge. "Chief!" Davis yelled from above. "I'm fine," I yelled back. I scrambled up. I lifted the hose again. My hands were covered in oil, making the tools slippery. I got one bolt in. I tightened it with my fingers, then the second. I used the wrench to tighten them down in a star pattern. I had to be fast. "Open the valve," I shouted up to Davis. I heard the clang of the valve wheel turning on the upper platform. A few seconds later, the rubber hose jumped. The pressure of the gravity-fed diesel hit the pump inlet. I looked at the flange connection. A small trickle of clear diesel leaked out from the bottom gasket. It wasn't a perfect seal, but it had to hold. "Get down here," I yelled. Davis slid down the ladder. "Start the pump," I said. Davis went to the starter panel. He pressed the green button. The electric motor whined and spun up to speed. We watched the pressure gauge. The needle flickered. 0, 0.5 bar. 0 again. "It's airlocked," Davis said. "The hose has air in it." "Crack the vent," I said. Davis opened the small vent cock on top of the pump housing. Air hissed out loud. Then a mix of foam and diesel sprayed out, covering Davis's boiler suit. He didn't flinch. He kept it open. "Come on," I said. The hiss turned into a steady stream of liquid fuel. Davis closed the vent. We looked at the gauge. It jumped. 4 bar, 5 bar, steady. "We have pressure," Davis said. "Phone the bridge," I said. "Tell them we are ready to start." I watched the hose. It was pulsing with the flow of the fuel. It was vibrating against the sharp edge of the steel grating. If it rubbed through, we would lose pressure instantly. I grabbed a rag and shoved it between the hose and the steel edge to protect it. The telegraph on the control console rang. The order moved from stop to slow ahead. The air start system kicked in. We heard the massive whoosh of compressed air entering the cylinders. The main engine turned over slowly. Chug, chug. Then the fuel injectors fired. Boom. The engine caught. The exhaust temperature gauges started to climb. The familiar vibration returned to the deck plates. The shaft began to turn. I grabbed the handset to call the bridge myself. "Bridge, engine room," I said. "Engine is running on diesel. Don't push it past slow ahead. We are feeding it through a garden hose down here." "Understood, Chief," Captain Miller said, "and we have steerage. We are turning away from the tanker now. Distance is 4 cables. It's close, but we are clear." I looked at Davis. He was wiped out. His face was smeared with oil. We stood there watching the rubber hose pulse, praying the temporary bolts would hold. The ship took another roll, but this time I felt the rudder bite into the water. The roll was controlled. We were moving again, but we weren't safe yet. We had a main engine running on a temporary rubber line that wasn't rated for this vibration. We had to keep it running for the rest of the storm. The fix was fragile, and we had hours of rough seas ahead of us. We could not relax. The main engine was running, but the setup was fragile. The rubber hose was pulsing rhythmically with the suction of the pump. Every pulse rubbed the rubber skin against the steel gratings of the deck. Even with the rags we had stuffed in place, the vibration was constant. If that hose split, the engine would stop again, and this time we would be too close to the coast to recover. "Davis, stay here," I said. "Watch that hose. If you see a leak, even a drop, shout." I needed to fix the main problem. We could not sail all the way to Newark on a jury-rigged garden hose. We had to clear the blockage in the main steel suction line. The third engineer arrived in the control room. He looked pale. The rolling of the ship was still. Heavy. making it hard to stand. I waved him down to the bottom plates. "Take over from the second," I told him. "Watch the pressure gauge. Watch the hose." Davis and I moved back to the steam trace line. The pipe was still cold to the touch. The fuel inside was like solid wax. The problem was the steam trap, a small mechanical valve that lets condensed water out but keeps the steam in. If it jams closed, the hot steam can't circulate and the pipe freezes. I grabbed a wrench and a bucket. "We have to open the trap bypass," I said. "The bypass valve allows steam to flow continuously, skipping the trap. It wastes water, but it forces heat through the line." I turned the wheel. It was stuck with rust. I used a valve key, a heavy steel hook, to force it. It creaked, then turned. Immediately, I heard a hammering sound in the small copper steam pipes. Clang, clang, clang. That was the sound of hot steam hitting cold water. It is called water hammer. It can burst pipes. "Easy," I said. "Open it slowly." I cracked the valve just a little more. The hammering settled into a steady hiss. Hot water sprayed out of the drain pipe into the bilge. Then came the steam. White clouds filled the lower platform. The air got hot and humid very quickly. Now we had to wait. You cannot rush heat. If you heat a pipe too fast, the flange gaskets might blow out. We took turns checking the pipe. Every 10 minutes, I walked along the 6-inch fuel line. I took off my glove and placed my hand on the steel. At the pump end, it was still ice cold. 5 meters back, it was starting to get lukewarm. The heat was traveling slowly. An hour passed. The ship was still pitching, but the rhythm was steady. The main engine was holding it slow ahead. The bridge didn't ask for more speed. They knew we were fragile down here. "Status?" I asked the third engineer. "Hose is holding, Chief. Pressure is steady at 4.2 bar. No leaks." I went back to the pipe. I checked the thermometer near the blockage. It read 40 degrees Celsius. It needed to be at least 80 to melt the plug effectively. "We need to help it," I said to Davis. "Get the heat gun." We used an industrial electric heat gun to apply extra heat to the specific elbow where the pipe bent toward the pump. That was the likely spot for the thickest blockage. We stood there for 30 minutes, taking turns holding the hot air blower against the steel. My arms ached from holding the heavy tool while balancing against the rolling of the ship. Finally, the thermometer hit 85 degrees. "Let's try to flush it," I said. We went to the standby pump, the one we were not using. I opened the drain valve on its suction filter. If the line was clear, oil should flow out. Nothing came out, just a few drops of cold, black tar. "Still blocked," Davis said. "It's soft, though," I said. I saw it move. "We need pressure." I went up to the middle platform. I found the manual hand pump for the priming system. I aligned the valves to push oil backward down the line. "Pump it," I told Davis. He started pumping the handle up and down. It was hard work. The pressure gauge on the hand pump rose. 10 bar, 20 bar. "It's not moving," he grunted. "Keep pushing," I said. "The heat is working. The pressure will break it." He pumped again. I watched the drain valve on the bottom platform. Suddenly, there was a loud squelch sound. A sausage of solid black sludge shot out of the drain valve and landed in the bucket. Behind it came a rush of hot, dark liquid. "Clear!" I yelled. "Stop pumping." Davis stopped. I closed the drain valve. The line was open. The heat had melted the core, and the pressure had pushed the solid plug out. Now came the most difficult part. We had to switch the running engine from the rubber hose back to the steel pipe. If we did it wrong, we would introduce an air pocket into the fuel rail, and the engine would stall. "We do it fast," I said. "I will open the main suction valve. You will close the hose valve. We do it on my count." I put my hands on the main steel valve wheel. Davis put his hands on the valve for the temporary hose. The third engineer stood by the phone, ready to call the bridge if the engine stopped. "1," I said. I took a breath. The engine noise was loud, a constant thumping rhythm that kept the lights on and the ship moving. 2, 3, go. I spun the main valve open as hard as I could. At the exact same moment, Davis spun the hose valve closed. The fuel pressure gauge dipped. It went from 4.2 bar down to 3.0 bar. The needle shook. The engine sound changed slightly. It hesitated for a fraction of a second. My heart hammered in my chest. Then the pressure needle shot back up. 4.0 bar, 4.5 bar. The engine note steadied. Thump, 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 thump. I waited 1 minute. I watched the gauge. It didn't move. The fuel was flowing through the main steel line again. The temperature was correct. The flow was stable. "Secure the hose," I said, "but don't disconnect it yet, just in case." We left the rubber hose in place, but valved off. I checked the steam trap again. It was passing steam correctly now. The pipe was hot to the touch, too hot to hold without gloves. That was how it was supposed to be. I picked up the phone. "Bridge engine room," I said. "Go ahead, Chief," the captain answered. "Main line is cleared. Engine is back on normal supply. You can increase speed to navigational full whenever you are ready." "Copy that, Chief," Miller said. "Thank you. Good work." I hung up. I looked at Davis and the third. We were covered in sweat and black oil. The floor plates were slippery. The bucket of sludge was sliding back and forth with the ship's roll. We were exhausted, but the ship was safe. By the next morning, the wind had dropped to a force 5. The swell was still there, but it was longer and smoother. The sun came out around 08 lighting up the wet decks. We spent the morning cleaning up. We disconnected the rubber hose, drained it, and rolled it back onto its drum in the storeroom. We cleaned the oil off the deck plates with degreaser and rags. We put the tools back on the shadow board. I went to the ship's office to write the official logbook entry. It was a short entry. 16:05, main engine stopped due to loss of fuel pressure. 16:15, emergency bypass rigged using flexible hose. 16:30, engine restarted on MDO. 19:45, main fuel suction line cleared of wax blockage. Steam heating restored. A 20-hour noche, main engine switched back to normal supply. It looked simple on paper. 5 lines to describe 4 hours of panic and hard labor. That is usually how it goes. The logbook doesn't record the heat, the noise, or the fear of drifting onto a rocky coast. It just records the facts. We arrived in Newark 2 days later. We had a shore technician come aboard to overhaul the steam trap properly. We also installed a new temperature alarm on that specific section of pipe so we would know if it got cold again before it became a disaster. The crew didn't talk much about it afterwards. It was just another breakdown, another problem solved. But for the rest of that contract, whenever I walked past that suction pipe, I put my hand on it just to check. It was always hot, and that was a good feeling. If any of you handled a moment like this in your time at sea, I'd be interested to hear it.